If there's one TF2 merc that I'm confident should beat Payday 2's campaign with his eyes closed, it's the Heavy. In theory, he should have access to 3 highly viable primaries, including the recently added Campbell LMG, which is outright busted at the moment. He can happily roleplay with perk decks like Armor or Muscle, which are pretty strong for a challenge that never goes beyond Death Wish, and has no real limiting factors holding him back. Which is why I decided if I'm going to try and replicate the playstyle of this Soviet bear in Payday 2, I'm going to do it the right way. Instead of using Payday's minigun counterparts, I'll be modding in the Heavy's true arsenal of weapons, and you can forget ever sneaking anything. This is going to be our first true loud-only challenge. Get behind me, Doctor, it's time to find out if you can beat Payday 2 as the Heavy. As ever, you guys know the score by now, here are the rules we're running with for today's challenge run. The goal is to complete Payday 2's career mode. Today we're going to do that by playing as the Heavy. As I've already alluded to, instead of trying to blindly replicate the weapons Misha uses in TF2, we're lucky enough to have access to his actual weapons modded directly into Payday 2. These incredible creations are the work of Silent Enforcer and will allow me to channel Sasha, Natasha, and Heavy's other favourite guns throughout the run. As such, this is a surprisingly mod-heavy challenge, and the full list can be found in the description, but most importantly, we'll be using the TF2 minigun pack and shotgun pack, so none of you can complain I'm subverting this one. I'm also allowed to use melee weapons that specifically make use of my fists. The other big ruling variation on this challenge is that there will be no stealth allowed. I don't have to break stealth immediately, but no heist can be cleared in stealth and I won't be picking up any silent kills at any point in time. You might ask how this is possible when you have heists such as Murky Station that mandate stealth. Well, once again, the power of Payday 2's modding community has saved this idea with loud variations installed to prevent anyone from outsmarting my bullets. As an extra challenge, given that Heavy's not known for his sharp intellect, I'm also borrowing the use of utility equipment such as ECMs or C4 to place our focus even more on combat. We'll be starting again at level 0 with no grinding for XP or money allowed outside of the regular flow of career mode. Everything will be played offline and solo. Crew AI is never allowed on this run as stealth is banned, and we'll be running those mods I mentioned earlier alongside Vanilla HUD Plus. All of my challenges mandate Mayhem from level 0 to 79 before amping up to Death Wish from 80 onwards. They've not been quite as crucial in recent challenge runs given the power of these TF2 mercs, but lifelines will be there if we need them. Drop difficulty is back, allowing us to lower our heist difficulty level by 1, crew support will allow us to bring crew AI along for an assist at some point in this run, and rule breaker allows for a single and slight bending of the rules if the time comes that I need it to progress. That's our monthly housekeeping out the way, so Yell 1 can once again reset and step into the shoes of TF2's most iconic character for the most faithful TF2 challenge run yet. Immediately, I switched over to our boy Ron Perlman for the Heavy voice line replacer to get me in the right headspace for this run. Unfortunately, our first heist is a tricky one to approach. We need to hit level 10 or complete the loud tutorial, which I normally try and avoid as it forces us to use AI and play on a lower difficulty. My usual alternative is to wait on CrimeNet until a reasonably easy heist stealth skillless and sometimes killless appears. Car Shop is ideal for this, but sadly we can't take that usual pacifist route as stealth is functionally banned on this run. However, thanks to our Stealth Heist Loud mod, we can still take it on, but we're forced to do so loud on Mayhem with only our bare fists. Hardly ideal, but it's the best idea I have at the moment. Heading in, the good news is that the mod works, as the point of no return is waylaid in favour of an immediate endless assault once stealth is broken. The 40 hit point security might be no match for my Fists of Steel and Sandwich combo, but that's only the tip of the iceberg on run 1. Car Shop's objectives remain the same, but having to place C4 in the middle of the street whilst cops shoot at you is a little more difficult than you might expect. Fortunately, I was fast enough to avoid the main wave's arrival and get back inside, hacking the correct computer immediately. But unfortunately, at this point I was facing down a wave of elite SWATs with only my Jukes for company. I was able to cheese the regular SWATs for a little while thanks to the overpowered domination mechanic, but it wasn't long before the indomitable Cloaker chased me down to give me the full scout treatment. Evidently, I couldn't afford to be quite as brash in my entrance, instead creeping through the back door on the second attempt, as stealthily as a Man Mountain can muster, to punch the branch manager into the dirt. Lesson in life, when you've got no cash, murder is free. After waiting out the hack, I dove through the upstairs window just to feel something and started setting up the C4 once again. Sadly, by the time I grabbed the car keys, the entirety of DC's police presence had decided to congregate next to the Falcaginis, and in the most Hoxton moment of my Payday playing career, I climbed into the passenger side of the supercar, forgetting the Yanks have it all backwards, leading to a uniquely British downfall. On the third attempt, I decided to hold it together in stealth for slightly longer before blasting the road and remembering to drive on the right side, clearing a very strange first heist of the run. This is just a prelude for how wild these loud stealth-only heists actually are though. On the plus side, this clear gave me enough experience to put together the first elements of the challenge run build. I unlocked and equipped the electric brass knuckles, giving me some crowd control to compensate for my lack of primary, and committed 2 partners in crime to help take the heat off me and deal some actual damage. The perk deck for this run just has to be Muscle. I know I messed up on Demo Man and should have used Stoic instead, but Muscle is too perfect for Heavy, with Disturbing the Peace playing exactly into the minigun playstyle. With the first point placed in that, I rolled up to the Harvest and Trusty branch bank with only fists and the power of persuasion on my side. Fortunately, on a heist like this, you don't need a whole lot more, managing to effectively stun lock groups of cops with the brass knuckles and then hold them in place through intimidation. Tasers presented a very tangible threat, bearing in mind I hadn't yet invested in shotproof, meaning a single slip up would guarantee a shocking end. But seeing as they're not resistant to being electrocuted themselves, I was comfortably able to keep them occupied as I drilled through both the vault door and following gate. My jokers were the MVPs here, giving me just enough room to escape with a single bag of cash and only 6 kills to my name. With that, I finally had enough cash to actually fight back, grabbing the TF2 shotgun as a bridge weapon to start off the heavy build. This thing can be customized into any of TF2's secondary shotgun options, but as heavy I'll only have access to stock, the panic attack, and the family business, each offering different stats and advantages. For jewelry store though, all I needed was the stock shotgun, rushing straight into the glass to move as many bags as possible before the van fled the scene. From there, it's just a case of holding down the back of the store whilst the drill goes to work. Immediately, my impression of the shotgun is that it feels just like its TF2 counterpart in form, function, and sound design. The only problem with this is that it also emulates its slightly lackluster damage potential, requiring 3 headshots to actually kill a medic at this point. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it also seems to operate differently to base game shotguns, which will deal full headshot damage so long as a single pellet lands. At times, I found myself clipping cops for less than 10 damage with this thing, which suggests that it might be working more like a traditional gaming shotgun, not Payday's diesel abominations. Unfortunately, this damage deficiency placed me on an uphill struggle against its ammo economy. The issue continued up until the van arrived, and I was knocked to the floor by an always overpowered melee strike. With what I'd learned though, I was able to keep my ammo supply in check at the second shot at this, saving my shotgun shells for higher health enemies, whilst allowing my jokers to pick off the tiny baby men. All was going great as I launched my egotistically embossed loot bags over to the escape van, securing the 8 I required, and then in the least necessary moment of greed, I headed back into the store for bag number 6, where unbeknownst to me, a heavy medic combo lay in wait to land the perfect punch into shotgun 2-step whilst I was distracted, taking me down before I could even react. And it gets even worse from there, as attempt 3 was set up for a flawless clear until one of those baby men I left alive earlier, armed with a Bronco, decided to remind me why beat cops are usually worth a few shots to take out. A record 3rd death on this heist due to not yet having uppers aced. Hardly the smooth sailing early game I was anticipating, but I'd learned my lesson by attempt 4 not to underestimate this challenge, as right now I was just roleplaying as Fat Scout with none of the extra health that comes with it. So I held down the back alley and prioritised securing all the bags I could before switching focus back to the safe, allowing me to rush to the van one final time and clear the heist. Things get harder before they get easier though, with Diamond Store basically existing as a harder jewelry store requiring more bags and with the added difficulty of a SWAT turret. As such, I spent most of this heist hiding in the security room and praying for the nearest escape, and in a positive twist of fate for once, the van actually did come in at the back of the store, by far the easiest of the heist variations that honestly saved this run from almost certain failure, allowing me to escape with a little extra cash after less than 10 minutes. Go Bank is the first of the notorious roadblocks for any challenge run, forcing some past rule sets over to stealth, except that isn't even an option for us here. Still wielding just a shotgun, I wasn't exactly filled to the brim with confidence heading in, and it seemed my skepticism was well earned as the rare sentry spawn decided to rock up on run 1 to join in on the laser light show of snipers, taking me down with ease. I was dealt a slightly less devastatingly bad hand on attempt 2, with most of the action happening out in the car park, where I was forced to contest the snipers with my shotgun to clear some space for the loot cage. This was far from ideal, but just about got the job done in the end. Crucially, having access to the ammo asset allowed me to take those pot shots without running into serious difficulty, and will be key until we finally unlock a minigun. Back at the vault, I was able to bring along the saw for utility, as unlike plastic explosives, it doesn't take a genius to operate, although I'm not permitted to use it in combat. This massively sped up the looting section of the heist, allowing me to immediately set off the balloon and bunker down for the escape. Learning I didn't need any bags in the cage when it's secured was a game changer for me on this heist, making the difficult holdout less frantic than it used to be. Even so, I had one incredibly close call with a taser who caught me with my pants down and saw on full display, only to be rescued by this brave Joker breaking their line of sight and likely saving this entire attempt. His heroics didn't go to waste, as I was just about able to brute force my way into the sewers and find the escape van without getting too lost. Go Bank and Diamond Store always pay well, meaning at level 46, maybe I could finally add the iconic minigun to my arsenal. Except it's still level locked. I'm sure this won't be a problem for the theming at any point, it must unlock soon. Anyway, stuck with just a secondary, it was at least time to try out some of those shotgun variations, with the panic attack apparently offering 50% more pellets per shot at the cost of a chunk of damage. Honestly, this thing feels about as bad as it did on launch in TF2. Its spread is insane, which would be great if it worked like a traditional Payday shotgun, but seeing as it appears to also deal damage per pellet, it just feels completely impotent. Rolling into a harbour transport, the panic attack was found seriously wanting. Just killing a single medic was turning into a full-time job, and any shots fired from further than 5 meters away seemed to just tickle their intended targets, although this sniper was the exception to the rule. As a result, after fighting hard to open up the vans, I was taken down unceremoniously by the butt of a point-blank taser. That over-reliance on getting up close and personal with the panic attack led to a similar downfall on the next attempt, this time at the hands of a pair of dozers who shared their communist manifesto with my face. Run 3 was no better, death by Reinfeld, and 4 saw me gracefully shot out of the sky by a sniper, presumably way off screen. Don't forget, I can always re-roll armoured transports to get easier variants like the sniper-free Park, but there was just something about this experience that was annoying me enough to keep banging my head up against the wall, as I was once again punished for my lack of tankiness 5 minutes into the next attempt. At last, I got the side truck spawn again, which is much easier to defend than the roadside RNG, allowing me to drill open the trucks, saw through the deposits and eventually secure the loot at the van escape, which was fortunately well concealed from those dreaded snipers. That heist was plenty of evidence that the panic attack was probably not my best option on this run, switching over to the family business instead, which also sacrifices a little damage up front in exchange for ammo and fire rate. As the breakpoints all remain the same with my current build, this thing just felt like a direct upgrade on the stock shotgun, although that didn't stop the regular beat cops and genset security eating their way through my meager health pool about 30 seconds into the next transport heist. Downtown is probably the hardest transport variation you can roll, but again I'm far too stubborn to just switch off it. And to be honest, you guys love watching me get the Rasputin treatment as I was body blocked, smacked around, tased and then dozed just a few minutes into attempt 2. That one was brutal, but just like Rasputin, it takes more than a few bullet wounds to dissuade the heavy, which is a relief as once again on attempt 3 I didn't even make it past Gensec. Getting that first Joker was the real key to having a chance on this heist, which I was eventually able to secure on the following attempt. With less focus on me, I was able to get the vans drilled open, keep the sniper population to a minimum, and escape this heist with the aid of a trail of sandwiches. This brings us onto the notorious train heist, one that usually consumes hours of my time as I internally debate if stealthing is worth the headache. On the plus side, the heavy rule set shortens that debate. We have to complete this loud regardless. Alas, I'm still just a hoovie with a shotgun and a dream, and I fear this might be a bridge too far at this point. Drilling access to the turret and ammo isn't really the problem, it's moving the 23 individual bags that causes the major headaches, but early into this heist we were handed a bit of a lifeline. After killing the first sniper spawn from across the map, instead of constantly spawning more on the warehouse side, the game decided to place the next one up on the south cliff face, who had zero vision on the objective side of the mission. Meaning, I could just let him chill out over there and not have to deal with constant sniper overwatch for the rest of the heist. This was absolutely pivotal to my success on this run. I was also lucky enough to come across the world's first narcoleptic SWAT in Payday 2 who went for a little nap on the thermal drill instead of actually trying to stop me accessing its contents. Even better, he was left in his paint me like one of your French girls pose impressively for the rest of the heist, even when he no longer had the drill to support him. With this kind of lazy police work, I was easily able to secure the NG's turret and start moving the shells, some by zipline, others by hand, using my impressive bulk to launch the shells meters at a time. After a painstaking 24 minutes and 12 FAK sandwiches consumed, I leapt into the sniper's line of sight for one last time, completing the heist, somehow, at the first time of asking. The irony of first timing train transport and failing almost 10 times on the regular transport heist is not lost on me, but I'll absolutely take it. Bane gives us a break now as we head over to Vlad's jobs. In the continued absence of my minigun, the panic attack might finally have a use for itself, as its insane pellet spread is ideal for Mallcrasher, a heist that I was able to knock out without too many problems. 4 stores was no different, as I finally surmounted my first bulldozers of this challenge after starting to build into shotgun skills, making for another easy clear. Despite being such a wide open heist, White Xmas has never really been much of a roadblock, and though my ammo supply ran low, this 4th successive first time completion was never in any doubt. Ukrainian job rounds off the full set of fodder heists that can be cleared by just about any build at this stage in the run, providing more lucrative XP for limited effort. Over the course of these heists, I'd rounded off my base survivability skills like shotproof and uppers, as well as fully specialising in overkill, assuming I was stuck with shotgun heavy, at least for the time being. This additional damage is absolutely pivotal, as next up is the ever problematic meltdown. Attempt 1 was shut down early in the warehouse as my overconfidence seemed to get the better of me. Although I was a lot deadlier, I still lacked skills like Iron Man that would help me tank up to the heavy's high standards. This was made even more apparent when the regular murky water guards took me down early in the next run. As ever though, these weren't the crushing failures that derail a challenge. It's when you go down 15 or 20 minutes into a heist that you really start to reconsider what you're doing with your life, and Meltdown loves to offer those little existential moments as often as possible. On run 3 I found myself nearing the train yard loaded up with nukes, but with multiple SWAT turrets in my way. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a weapon that, well, I don't know, weighed 150 kilograms and maybe fired $200 custom tool cartridges at 10,000 rounds per minute around about now? Just a thought. Without anything but the family business, I was left firing blanks into the turret, which it returned with interest, taking me down before I could take a bite on the sandwich. However, on the plus side, this was a bit of a penny drop moment for me. I learned the forklift nuke balancing technique a little while ago when I was speedrunning the game. Since then, I've no idea why I haven't just been using the Longfellow to avoid these SWAT vans altogether on challenge runs. This realization was just in time as I was starting to perfect shotgun heavy combat and just needed a little extra safety to get through Meltdown. It didn't take long to crack the vault open and start delivering the warheads 4 at a time to the muscle car, which as expected was much better suited for speeding past the dangerous turrets rather than trundling next to them at 5 miles per hour. Heavy, as we know, is canonically a great driver. Having to run back for the second half of the nukes does increase the risk of being sniped, but with muscle, that's a much more palatable risk than charging head-on into a rain of sentry bullets. This adaptation saw me speeding out a second time to the trains and securing all 8 warheads on my very first attempt with this strategy, something I'll hopefully remember for future runs. Aftershock is next on the chopping block, once again forcing us to interact with Payday's least polished mechanic, driving. It's generally a much easier heist though, so it was lucky to be another first time clear until I managed to seriously misposition into the more dangerous escape spawn pattern, finding myself caught out with just a tent for protection whilst martial snipers and shields reminded me why they had made challenge running Payday 2 that bit more difficult recently. They softened up my health pool just enough to force a mistake as I ran directly into a taser who outright finished the job. Always frustrating to go down deep into a heist, but it's not a big deal on Aftershock, or so I thought, until just 2 minutes into the next run, 5 snipers decided to join the party early and turn California into 2 Fort. No place for old heavies. Attempt 3 was more what I've come to expect from this heist, with snipers only starting to spawn about 6 minutes in, which gave me plenty of time to move the weapon safes and set up for the escape. Things got a little scary as my favourite pointless structure was almost overrun by cops, but I was able to hold off thanks to how politely they file in through the front door to eat my buckshot, escaping this heist at the 3rd time of asking. Now, I admit I was starting to get a little desperate at this point. Level 65 and still no sign of my minigun, which you know is the whole theme of this run. I don't want to have to put Fat Scout in the title of this video, so I'm going to try and speed my way through the minigunless portion of this challenge as succinctly as possible. So moving on to Nightclub, I always try and speed through this snorefest of a heist regardless, but in what might be another challenge run first, I somehow managed to position so poorly I actually died to a sniper in the club office, 7.5 minutes in. Not my finest moment, but it hardly mattered as run 2 was a downright easy success. This gave me enough experience to pick up Disturbing the Peace, a perk I wasn't really able to showcase with the demo man for obvious reasons, but will be absolutely instrumental for this run. Even now, without a minigun, it helps tremendously against snipers by suppressing them, even if I can't actually hit them, coming in fairly handy on the roof of the next heist, stealing Xmas, which I was easily able to breeze through on attempt number 1. Watch Dogs commenced with me surrounded by images of myself, my favourite way to start the day. Alas, I'd only be bringing along 5 of these beautiful bags onto day 2. Hector's jobs rarely cause problems, and as usual, Watch Dogs went off without a hitch. Firestarter is a change of pace in which I was forced to destroy Heavy's beautiful visage, much to my utter despair. Despite the emotional damage, day 1 is easy and day 2 is much the same, especially when the snipers don't even bother showing up. Day 3 is just a bank heist with the added difficulty of spawning in school dozers, one of which decided to join me, warming himself inside the burning vault and giving me the fright of a lifetime before I was eventually able to put him down and clear the heist. Regularly, rats is just as easy as Hector's previous jobs, but with a few unlucky dozer spawns and my crippling lack of damage, I wasn't quite as proficient at keeping the house clear as usual, resulting in a dozer-taser combo taking me down for run 1. The second time around though, I held it together much better, turning the staircase into a cop funnel and even picking up a kill or two with my newly equipped boxing gloves. Sadly, these aren't the gloves of running urgently, and they're only really here to complete the look. The shotgun did most of the heavy lifting anyway as I headed into day 2, meth in hand, made the trade with the Cobras and wiped the Mendozas off the face of the earth on day 3. The Elephant's up next and sadly, still no minigun, with much tougher jobs on the horizon. Big Oil, for one, requires more intellect than I think the Heavy's working with, but we'll give it a go regardless. It was interesting actually going loud on day 1, a heist I virtually always just ECM rush due to its unparalleled ease. I honestly had no idea snipers even spawned on this map, but they do, and they did a pretty good job at peppering me whilst I attempted to drill the safe out on the balcony. This day was actually damn close to failure a few times, and if I wasn't packing 14 sandwiches that function as an IV drip of healing, I absolutely would have gone down after securing the address, but as a man of great stature and many sandwiches, it was just about enough to send us into day 2. A couple of minutes into attempt 1 of this, I don't even know what happened. One minute I had half a health bar and a full set of ribs, the next I was on the floor, ribless and bleeding. But don't worry, I'm told they do grow back, and they must do, as run 2 was actually a massive success. I was able to hack entrance to the lab without too many power cuts, found the good doctor's notes before the lights went out, and with a little Russian ingenuity, the performance enhancing drug known as Big Oil Solver, our Heavy was able to grab the right engine at the first time of asking. A true idiot savant. Hell, at this point, I'm getting so good at Payday, sometimes cops just straight up vanish before me, as if they already know the outcome. Never change, Payday 2. Big Oil's completion takes us onto Framing Frame, where I was once again able to lean on my saw to speed up progress, making quick work of the bars protecting the paintings, to shoot through day 1 and even enable me to use a safer shortcut on day 2, for no reason at all. Sadly, day 3 of Framing Frame is a bloody nightmare. More so than any other heist in the game, the cops are insanely good at pathing to and turning off the power boxes. To make matters worse, 3 spawn, seldom can you cover 2 from one location, and the cops have this knack of always targeting the one you're specifically furthest away from. I find this heist infuriating solo, and of course this run was no different. Within 5 seconds of me locating the server and starting the hack, the power was already down, and that would be the theme throughout. A 6-minute 40-second hack turns into a 15-minute plus cycle of running up and down the penthouse floors trying to keep on top of the power boxes like you're playing bloody Five Nights at Freddy's or something. I hate it. It's not even a difficult heist. Snipers aren't a problem, there's plenty of cover, and it's well suited to shotguns. It's just that risk of failing a heist this tedious and having to start again that looms so heavily over you that everything feels that bit more intense. You can see this fear peaking about 6 seconds from the end of the hack as my world very nearly collapses in on me within the server room, but fortunately I had the firepower necessary to clear a path and escape the torment of Framing Frame without failing once. Election day is next, and I was hoping I could tag the wrong truck before the alarm went off, but given my general lack of sneakiness, this was unsurprisingly a bust. Instead, I was forced to upload the shipping info from the terminal, which was a little more time consuming, but not an overly challenging holdout. I was hoping we wouldn't locate the right truck for day 2, as it's generally my preferred day when going loud immediately. My wish was granted here as I was sent to accidentally blow up some ballot machines at the polling station, and as election tampering is in my blood for this one, it shouldn't be so difficult. Tight corridors and limited spawns are prime for shotgun multi-kills, as the family business was proving why it's worth having those extra shells loaded. After drilling the vault open, I grabbed a couple of bags of loot, took out a sniper from halfway across the map, and escaped with an election successfully rigged. At this point, I was starting to get a little paranoid. Would we ever see a minigun in this challenge run? I was level 78 and had unlocked literally every other weapon in the game, so it was looking slightly doubtful. But I couldn't just keep pondering. Big Bank is next and should be relatively easy on Mayhem. Naturally, the last PC I hacked was the right one, slowing things down, but not really throwing the heist off course. Once again, the saw comes in really handy on a heist like this, speeding up most objectives and giving me much quicker access to the vault's loot, which I greedily scooped up and dropped in the elevator shaft for a sluggish but simple first time completion. Still not hitting level 80, I was able to tackle one final heist on Mayhem in Hotline Miami, which is a whole lot easier on this difficulty. Day 1 is all about speed and trying to not get sniped, with the family business once again doing an excellent job of rooftop cleanup. This earned me the space to go glove to glove up against a dozer, landing an impressive knockout blow. Riding high off that, I was able to force access to the cellar and quickly scan the right barcode. Seconds from its completion, a taser very nearly held me in place for a dozer to get his revenge, but I landed a clutch shot on him, freeing myself to take care of the dozer a few seconds later, fleeing to the DeLorean for a relatively quick win. Day 2 is much more challenging when we get up to the penthouse, but I'd love to know what sick man sent these suit-wearing babies to fight me on the way up, as I was easily able to tear my way through the low-health grunts. Drilling into the Commissar's vault, I was forced to take on multiple dozers at once on this heist, though I'm now much better equipped to deal with them. The Commissar himself ended up being pretty much stun-locked to death, strangely clipping into the filing cabinets and failing to really get a shot off on me, opening up a path to immediately escape and ding that all-important level 80, moving us onto Death Wish. Not only was this an important milestone to bring up the run difficulty, with a rush of relief, I discovered it was also the level at which the TF2 minigun finally unlocks, and not a moment too soon. Heading into Death Wish now, the real heist begin, and we get to choose between 4 unique, glorious miniguns. Unfortunately, knowing it'll cost $400,000 to fire this weapon for 12 seconds, this might also be the point at which we bankrupt Bane, but we can deal with him later. For now, we're heading into Hoxton Breakout with the stock minigun. This is going to be an excellent test for the power and potential of Heavy's pride and joy Sasha, now rocking fully auto-orientated skills such as body expertise to lean into the new playstyle. Regardless of the build, this weapon's stats look seriously insane. It deals 84 damage per bullet with 600 RPM, and despite having less than ideal handling stats, should be a beast, bearing in mind it fires 4 bullets per shot. That's not quite 10,000 per minute, but still pretty damn impressive. In terms of how it feels in-game, honestly, it's unbelievable. Everything from the sound, to the feel, to the knockback on enemies is spot on. It launches bodies, has excellent ammo economy, and just like Heavy's own minigun, doesn't need to reload. I'll be 100% transparent here, this thing is OP. It might be even better than the damn Campbell, but hell if it isn't one of the most enjoyable custom weapons I've ever wielded in a Payday game, and it's going to make for one hell of a run from here on in. Despite how much of a powerhouse I now wield, the tide has turned against me slightly in terms of survivability, and without having unlocked 800-pound Gorilla yet, I was far more susceptible to death than I ever had been on Mayhem. This was immediately apparent as I was forced to lean heavily into FAKs around the first corner of the gauntlet. From there though, I simply pushed on ahead of the Jokers to clear a path to the van where fewer cops had been spawning, gaining access to the garage and fighting a tense 1v1 with the schooldozer in the control room. Sasha is incredibly good at tearing through crowds of regular cops, but in all honesty, its DPS against dozers leaves a lot to be desired, so I fear these guys will give me a few problems in the future. In any case, that brings us on to day 2, where for some reason, I decide to lean on the shotgun again early on instead of just mowing down everything in sight, leading to 1, 2, and 3 deaths at the hands of the glass cannon FBI agents. Although I eventually pulled it together to take these guys out safely, I was forced to cry some more at the hands of a schooldozer who, as I feared, was able to out-DPS my build if I missed any shots. Outside of another messy scuffle with the FBI at the entrance, Attempt 5 was much cleaner all around, as I held down the control room and could move around surprisingly freely despite the size of my gun. If I was going to go all meta balance nerd on this thing, I'd probably make it heavier to carry and add a reload, because this weapon auto-reloading makes your DPS just a little too consistent in my opinion. I'm not complaining though, as it's helping me breeze through a fairly tricky heist, pushing back to the entrance with the server after 17 minutes of hardly letting go of left trigger, and coming out on top of a seriously intense battle with a pair of minigun dozers next to the escape, allowing me to clear a pivotal Hoxton breakout. This gave me the last bit of XP necessary to complete the muscle perk deck and additional cash to invest in a full set of 4 miniguns. From top to bottom we have Sasha and its retextures the Iron Curtain and Natasha, the Tomislav, a more accurate but slower firing variant, the Hulong Heater, which trades some ammo, pickup and damage for an incendiary effect, and the Brass Beast, which simply deals more damage at the cost of 10% movement speed. These all seem to have their own unique uses, so having access to any at all times will be necessary. For now, it's Tomislav's time to shine on the multi-ranged Hoxton Revenge heist. This weapon's improved accuracy over range makes it much more consistent and safe to use, not having to walk right into the face of a dozer to deal headshot damage. Even better, bearing in mind it fires 4 shots at once, it's surprisingly easy to shoot down snipers over more than 50 meters. Its lower DPS can be felt at times, but it absolutely still has the stopping power to turn Hector into Swiss cheese. Alas, instead of taking the time to kill all snipers on the map before heading up to the roof to secure the evidence, I rushed directly into it, lost a door with a shield marshal, and was sniped off the roof in a matter of seconds. Attempt 2 was pretty much a carbon copy for the first half of the heist, taking out snipers with ease, handing Hector a lead-filled eviction notice, and starting to gather the bags of evidence for the escape. This time though, I kept the snipers in check and moved most of the bags during the fade, giving me room to flee the heist without being contested. The Diamond is the dentist's next contract for us, a predominantly close-range heist that I assume would suit the fiery Kknowley heater absolutely perfectly. Now let me qualify this immediately, this weapon is not okay. It deals immense incendiary damage with its actual ballistics, alongside a wide radius AoE fire effect that lights up everything in your vicinity, even through walls. To say this is a little overpowered would be underselling it, as every regular enemy and most specials can be carved through in a matter of seconds with limited risk due to the stunning effect of fire damage. Honestly, this minigun does a lot more than just spy check and should really tilt the odds of this run in my favour, if it weren't for one glaring flaw. It can't deal headshot damage. This means that bulldozers, already the most problematic enemy for this run, are hugely resistant to the weapon's gimmick. Whilst I could walk into any group of regular cops, fire a couple of shots and then get to fisting, just encountering a single bulldozer was a terrifying, potentially run-ending prospect, as showcased when I was punched down the stairs and sent reeling into custody by this Isma-wielding monster. On attempt 2, I cleanly made it back to the Diamond Sanctum before being hit by a flashbang and wandering straight into the grid trap, for once failing the puzzle unintentionally. In the end, this run was thwarted at almost exactly the same point as the previous one, when a green dozer managed to thread the needle, hitting a lethal dose of buckshot right as I moved between cover. On attempt 3, I managed to get caught out using the shotgun by a taser, holding me still for yet another dozer-related failure on this straightforward heist. Clearly, for as overpowered as the heater was, its drawback up against dozers made it entirely unsuitable for this rule set. On the 4th go around though, I was lucky enough to get a simple pattern for the Sanctum puzzle, speeding up this heist escape and preventing more embarrassment at the hands of dozer kind. Evidently, I couldn't rely on the heater to carry this run, sending it back to the supply cabinet, not to return until I'm completely out of other options. Instead, I decided to try out the Brass Beast, which seems like an almost direct upgrade to the other miniguns. As it has the same spin time in Payday 2 as the alternatives, its damage buff is certainly worth the movement speed penalty, making dozers that bit less of a threat on the Golden Green Casino. Despite the scale of this heist, it's never been too challenging, as I was easily able to laser cut my way to the dentist's loot and escape the heist with minimal stress. Next up, the Butcher's heists are pretty challenging at this stage of the run, but at least the dockyard actually has some cover for me to use. With the firepower Heavy has at his disposal, holdout sections of heists are much easier. If only I had access to this kind of DPS back on Framing Frame. From that launchpad, it was a simple enough job to grab the bomb parts from the Moretta and carve a straight path back to the helicopter escape for a nice clean first time clear. Scarface Mansion is another heist with ridiculously long sightlines, meaning the Tomislav makes the most sense to bring. This is possibly the most dramatic barrel roll I've ever seen performed by a Heavy SWAT, who was left in a rather compromised position afterwards. Knowing they were my kryptonite, the game sure loved to spawn dozers in their droves, but at the very least, the mansion grounds are expansive enough to avoid having to always face down this run's arch nemesis, instead keeping most at arm's length until I had them one-on-one. Even then, these were almost always closely ran DPS races, which I was just barely coming out on top of thanks to the miracle restorative powers of the sandwich. Ernesto Souza went the same way as Hector, comically unable to get a shot off as he chewed his way through a fortune's worth of ammunition. Landing bullets on the distant snipers before the escape felt like a true dice roll, but eventually the Tomislav got the job done, affording me the room to secure all 6 bags of powder without much of a roadblock. The 20 levels of Crime Spree are no big deal on overkill, so I hardly need to cover the bank heist I blitzed through for an easy completion. Back onto the more challenging heist though, counterfeit can cause problems if you roll up into the wrong RNG, or if you don't notice snipers have spawned in as they silently wipe your health pool in under a second. Not to worry, attempt 2 went far better, as I was able to disable this SWAT van that rather rudely drove directly into the wall of a residential property, blasting open the safe, grabbing the plates and fleeing to the sewers, remembering to holster my Brass Beast to maintain that movement speed and just outrun the pursuing dozers. First world bank is never that challenging, although I found myself wishing I brought the Tomislav as I was draining most of my ammo trying to deal with snipers halfway across the map. The ammo economy in these miniguns is just too good though, as I was able to recover my missing rounds quickly, set up the thermite to force entrance into the vault, and one by one settle my score with all 4 of the green dozers who act as dangerous fixed spawns on this heist. From there I was easily able to secure the loot and push the escape truck without too many roadblocks to slow me down. Murky Station is the first mandatory loud stealth heist we have to take on, so once again let's see how the mod handles this adaptation. Almost immediately, it's clear that it doesn't do so in a particularly nuanced way, just spawning groups of shields and dozers to try and gate progress through the heist by sheer force. As I pushed my way up Death's Staircase over here, it was clear that a zombie horde of cops stood in my way, with some even being lobotomized like zombies, given that Diesel tends to struggle with its cop AI when there were over 100 enemies spawned in on the map. Taking a glance at my hood, you might even notice the 10 bulldozers seemingly hunting me down for spending too long on the heist. Even so, I was able to move the EMP parts up to the van until my curiosity and intrusive thoughts got the better of me, tempting me in to check the state of Death's Staircase. Sadly, this waste of time and ammo allowed the dozers to regroup, surrounding me on all sides and shutting down this attempt immediately. Clearly, time was of the essence with how these stealth-only heists were being balanced, so on run 2 I prioritised immediately finding the required mission equipment in the underground tunnels and just securing the bomb parts with as little bloodshed as possible. Boiling Point is another occasional roadblock for any run, but I was determined to prove that I was the supreme Soviet in this Russian lab, finally equipping the ICTV to reach max tankiness with almost 700 combined health and armour. This wasn't enough to keep me from going down on run 1 though, when a pair of Russian dozers teamed up to take me down before I could get a sandwich to my lips. Packing the Tomislav really did make those dozer damage races harder to win, but at least I was well prepared to deal with the snipers on my escape. With the close range firepower of any minigun, the patient scan wasn't a problem, and the clifftop snipers covering the escape were easy to keep in check thanks to the stunning effect of disturbing the peace, turning a usually problematic heist with its backloaded difficulty into an 11.5 minute breeze. As has been the theme of this challenge, everything seems to be happening in reverse, as I demolish the usually difficult heists and then waste hours on the easy ones. Case in point, single combat with a SWAT van turret is ill-conceived, resulting in a first failed Santa's Workshop. But obviously, that would be a one-off as I got double dozed 6 minutes into attempt 2. Oh well, I'm happy to embarrass myself a few times in a short heist rather than suffer those long resets, as there's just something about the heavy playstyle that tempts me to take undue risk. On my way to the escape, I was still nearly tasted death on attempt 3, fortunately pulling my aim together at the last moment to save the situation and secure this heist clear. Car Shop is next, but we've already pulled this one off in Loud, and it's honestly not bad at all so long as you don't hang around too long or forget which side of the road the steering wheel is on. Now, up next, everyone repeat after me, the biker heist is bad, I deserve godlike RNG for its sins. The hope was this would manifest some of the easier objectives in run 1, but I'm doomed to suffer on this heist eternally as the fixed Skulldozer spawns wrapped around and took me out early on. Run 2 wasn't a whole lot better as I was pushed into a corner whilst defending the tough garage objective, eventually falling to a black dozer this time. Honestly, if we look back at cause of death across this run, I'm fairly certain it'll be like 90% dozer related. They really are a serious problem for this setup. Attempt 3 started much better though as I got the objectives moving, kept on top of the dozer population, and managed to cause one of my favourite ragdolls of all time. What a pirouette! Once I'd successfully managed to hold up the garage objective, I was fairly convinced this would be the run, collecting the seat for the final request and timing my escape perfectly as the courtyard emptied out and no snipers had a view of the bike. I will gladly trade all the inexplicable failure on early heists for a third time completion of Biker Heist Day 1. For Day 2, I switched over to the Hulong heater for once, hoping it could help me basically CC everything on the train. The plan wasn't foolproof however, as dozers were again the thorn in my side, gating progression. Attempt 2 was much kinder in the enemies it threw at me, although I didn't really think about how much of a slog the biker boss would be to kill, having to whittle her down with a stock shotgun before following up with a fiery volley. The run back was basically a sandwich eating contest, which I was never going to lose at, juggling FAKs to reach the chopper and finally escape. Honestly, not bad at all as far as the biker heist goes, which brings us onto Panic Room, where for once, with the Tomislav at my side, I was actually well equipped to fight the dreaded sniper army. Of course, first I had to riddle Chavez full of bullets, who died without much recourse, not a big surprise. For the first time I can remember, I was actually able to clear every single spawning sniper on the roof without having to retreat downstairs, a genuinely impressive feat in my opinion. I even had the stopping power to attempt to clear the roof for bile without just waiting for the assault wave to end, but eventually was forced to fall back against a wave of bulldozers. But by that point, I turned the roof into a scene straight out of Meet the Medic. This was the most authentic heavy experience so far, WM warning, as I cleared through every moving thing from the ground floor to the roof and escaped the heist with comparative ease. This was a little bit of a watershed moment for me, as I think I was starting to comprehend the true power of the minigun selection, turning my newfound skills towards Brooklyn 1010, where the Tomislav did its job in taking down the snipers and gangsters on the road below perfectly. Once I was at the escape, I was actually able to clear out the road and move the police vans without having to default to hiding in the shadows, guaranteeing an almost faultless clear. But from that clean heist to one of the messiest around, the allowed variation on the yacht heist is just like Murky Station, but condensed into a 4x4 box room. Once the dozers started rolling in, this was always going to be an uphill struggle, forcing me to move through the objectives quickly and flank around the map to confuse their pathing as much as possible. The dining room was turning a shade of red by about 6 minutes of this, as I was quickly cornered by dozers from all angles, but apparently I am bulletproof, as these guys were seriously struggling to make a dent in my health pool. Eventually, I forced my way back to the laptop to hack open the server room, where it seemed like no cop could reach me in time before I stole the hard drive and made my escape right next to some brainless cops. On to Undercover next, and this one, with the Tomislav, is really not that bad. The limo was tossed onto the balcony, meaning I didn't need to spend long on the roof, but even when I did, my minigun provided enough damage and suppression to keep the snipers at bay. Once strapped in, I repeatedly remind the taxman that I am in fact the heavy weapons guy.
I am heavy weapons guy!
Which apparently broke his resolve, handing over the codes and allowing me to set up for an easy escape. Here the heist could have taken a very nasty turn had this green dozer been just slightly closer to me when he landed that shot, but fortunately I was able to get clear and secure the win. That brings us onto the hardest classic for this rule set, Slaughterhouse, a bag-heavy heist with a history of waylaying challenge runs. And shortly after drilling the safe on attempt 1, I was reminded of why trying to just avoid dozers and pretend they're not there often ends in disaster, as I was encircled and shot down by 3 of the lads at once. Attempt 2 started at a similar pace, as I was able to again open up the gold safe without too many interruptions. Here is where the challenge really begins on this heist though, as pushing through the slaughterhouse conveyors tends to be full of pitfalls to trip up any promising run. In a bold new strategy, I wanted to try and move as many bags as possible on the first trip to avoid having to wade slowly through a myriad of snipers who spawn shortly after entering the storage yard. With my impressive firepower, I was able to juggle 5 bags of gold into the crate on the first push, returning to the safe to pick up the final 3 bags and complete the objective. This balancing act was honestly a great success, with the Tomislav doing an excellent job of culling the snipers as they spawned, enabling me to progress to the holdout section of the heist. Here I had an incredibly close call with the taser, who took full advantage of the fact I'd just taken shotproof out of my build, as I was incredibly lucky to clip him with a couple of shots whilst flailing around, just in time before he also downed me. I wouldn't be taking any more risks this far into such a bogey heist though, holding out at the much safer entrance of the warehouse until escape became available, and running the shipping crate gauntlet without much interruption. Once again, Heavy had come in clutch on a notoriously problematic heist, and for once, I didn't celebrate the historic victory by proceeding to repeatedly throw the next, much easier heist along. Beneath the Mountain has its moments, but once inside the compound things tend to get a lot easier. As ever, I only grabbed 2 of the loot bags before heading up to the rooftop exterior to blow some satellites sky high and steal a chopper. I spent most of this section hiding from a martial sniper who was so far away I had virtually no chance of clearing him off the map, but he alone wasn't much of a threat, meaning I could refuel the helicopter and take off immediately after. Beneath the Mountain's much more dangerous Big Brother, Birth of Sky is next, and as one of the most open heists in the game, it presented many more challenges for my build. The plane gauntlet is always a joke though, these guys are going to need much bigger guns if they're ever going to present a real challenge. They could actually learn a bit from the beat cops who love to give me a scare early into the heist. Once that was survived though, I set about first rebuilding the broken pallets, meaning I could take on the easier 2 when also having to juggle the sniper overwatch, where despite being cornered on the gas station roof, I just about had the damage to jump ship, secure the final pallet of the diner, and dive directly into the sewer system. This section is a race against the clock to both grab a joker and place thermite on the grates before the tunnels fill up with unkillable specials. Instead of taking down the fixed triple dozer spawn, I baited them into a charge and sprinted directly past them to the boat, leaving my joker to have a quiet word with them whilst I fled along the river, escaping another difficult heist at the first time of asking. Truly on a roll now, Heat Street gave me the opportunity to romp through the streets of New York with the Brass Beast, trivializing the holdout at the car crash despite a plethora of minigun dozers spawning to try and ruin my celebratory mood. Getting Matt moving along the street was also easy enough, as I had the DPS to keep most threats at bay, marching up the main road to the clearing and only having to deal with a couple of snipers blocking my path. Another quick and simple win. If only the same could be said for Green Bridge, as not even an Uber charge could have kept Attempt 1 afloat up against a double dozer pincer maneuver. Run 2 was absolutely obliterated early on by what I assume was a dozer, before Run 3 finally got a bit of momentum going. The holdout at the top of the scaffold was absolutely manageable with my current build, meaning all that was left was a sprint to the finish line. But in a moment of madness, I decided to go on an ammo hunting tear, which resulted in a taser springing up out of nowhere and holding me in place to cut this attempt short. I've slowed this footage down a few times, and I'm now fairly certain that this fella here was the culprit, so I wasn't even shooting at the right tasers to have a chance at breaking the stun. Unfortunate, but you know what's even more unfortunate? Failing to record the next successful attempt. This marks a first for the series, as an official heist clear has gone unrecorded, just about managing to capture the success screen when I noticed Shadowplay wasn't lit up. Now, conspiracy theorists out there might be immediately calling for an investigation here, wanting VAR in to invalidate this run, but trust me, you haven't missed out on much. The missing footage was almost a carbon copy of the prior failed attempt, except this time I avoided tasers at all costs and skirted around the school dozers and heli turrets with my remaining FAKs for a final sprint to victory. I know the run's tainted, but hey, it's a miracle that it's taken this long for some footage to go missing on this series. I'm at least grateful for that. Onwards and upwards, the lock home straight is now thoroughly underway, starting with Alaskan Deal, another heist which is best suited for the Tomislav, which still comes with a clear weakness up against dozers. This build is gagging for crit, which was highlighted when a school dozer ground his way through 2 full health bars alone, taking my uppers proc and preventing the next sandwich from saving me courtesy of a high damage Death Wish shield. Attempt 2 was my redemption run though, tearing my way to the boat in the most satisfying way possible, freeing the captain and dealing with the snipers, this time leaning on my shotgun to get the job done. For the first time in Yelwonk's now illustrious career, we managed to refuel the boat without having it interrupted thanks to the extra killing power this build's packing. Escape shortly after was all but confirmed, rocketing that confidence back sky high. And the last of the diamond-themed heist wasn't going to slow down the march to the White House. Quickly hacking the security system, locating the CFO, and winning the class war emphatically, this has to be the most brutal Bane move in the entire game. With the vault code secured though, the diamonds were left exposed, securing all 8 bags and escaping the high-rise with little resistance. Reservoir Dogs, at least as far as day 1 is concerned, is normally fairly easy, but here I am getting steamrolled by a pair of dozers 1 minute in. Not the ideal start. Fortunately, Attempt 2 avoided that early jeopardy as I went on to open up a shrine made out to heavy. Diamonds secured. Day 2, or day 1 depending on your perception of time, comes next. Knowing how intense the initial ambush can be, I switched over to the powerhouse that is the Brass Beast, but even that wasn't enough to survive the march of the school dozers on run 1. Attempt 2 rolled a much more favourable ambush setup though, allowing me to survive the initial assault at the shop front windows and prepare for the second wave of dozers. This got intense, but I still have the firepower to fight back and dodge in and out of the display cases for cover. The difficulty here is actually front-loaded, meaning once the initial assault is repelled, you get a little respite during the midsection of the heist. What I wasn't prepared for was a surprise vault dozer, who would have put me in the ground if not for a quickly scoffed sandwich. With the vault now open though, the objective turns to the streets and keeping on top of snipers, which really isn't the Brass Beast's forte. This meant I had to play around that additional risk, eating through my FAK supply to stay afloat and secure the final diamonds, outrunning a SWAT turret on the way to the escape van, which is actually a surprise given my, shall we say, robust physique. Another huge stepping stone on the way to the challenge completion though, with Brooklyn Bank surely not representing much of a challenge at all. Every time, eh? When you're confident a heist is a walk in the park, a double dozer combo rocks up to keep you humble. Brooklyn Bank really is an easy heist, so the second attempt avoided the jeopardy of the first. I was able to defend the drill, enter the vault, grab the medallion and flank round to the sewers, escaping with a brutal push, flanking around the dozers and mowing them into the ground. That said, if you thought that was brutal, you ain't seen nothing yet. Breaking feds as a loud heist might be even more of a nightmare than in stealth. The map is so linear and claustrophobic, when 10 dozers decide to spawn in, you better have an answer, and whilst the Brass Beast is a fairly good answer when the question consists of maybe 2 dozers, it's less relevant when you're looking at 5 or 6 of the guys with medics by their side. Sadly, whilst Garrett is understandably removed from the heist to prevent some sort of accidental narrative time paradox taking place if we were to accidentally murder him, Locke's also missing in action, meaning no one can give you clues to the password. This means that you're basically rolling a dice to complete the objective, which is far from ideal when time is absolutely of the essence. In the end, Garrett's office was simply breached and I was left unable to address all threats at once. On attempt 2, I understood that I simply couldn't try and outkill this endless assault, prioritising the objective and only gunning down what stood in my way, which was admittedly still incredibly satisfying. Every time I guessed the code wrong, I could simply reset to the opposite side of the map and attempt to bait the dozers away from the key objective, which sort of worked, although half the cops on the map seemed to be pondering the meaning of life instead of hunting me down anyway, which was much appreciated. I was lucky enough to find the keycard on code number 2 this time, flanking around the many dozers, who now numbered 11 on the map, somehow avoiding a game crash in the process. With the coffer finally in my possession, all I needed to do was head down to the elevator, where Twitch was waiting to escort me to safety, away from the terrifying, final loud converted stealth heist. In conclusion on these things, they're hilarious, but damn are they a mess, and I have to thank my lord and saviour, Apex Gaming PCs, for not only sponsoring the videos, but also saving the run, whilst Payday mods try to assassinate my machine. Henry's Rock, on the other hand, is more preoccupied with assassinating me personally, as I'm positive its dozer spawn rate is not good for my heart's health. Within the first minute of attempt 1, I was facing down 3 of the guys with nowhere to run, but the brass beast kept to tradition and worked its way through their health bars slowly, buying me enough time to actually enter the compound properly. Unfortunately, I was sent to the dreaded weapons lab for by far the least well covered objective first, which led to another dozer duo taking me down shortly after. On attempt 2, everything was smooth sailing, right up until the escape section, where I trapped myself up against a wall, pinned by turrets, and rapidly cornered by my good friends the dozers once again. On attempt 3, seemingly everything hit at once just seconds into the run, going through over 700 total effective health in an instant. You might have noticed by now that I've avoided using the usual Feign Death Messiah combo, just because I feel I've lent on it too much in previous runs. I want to prove to myself I complete a loud-only challenge with just my own ability to stay alive. At this point, I'm starting to slightly regret my hubris as attempt 4 saw the dozers chalk up another win against Heavy. Attempt 5 was foiled right at the end again, this time by a damn Marshal. Undoubtedly, these guys spawning in the second half of Heist have made challenge runs noticeably harder, even if they haven't affected regular gameplay that much. But at least he broke the streak of dozer-related fatalities, only for me to head straight back to my losing ways on attempt 6. The challenge was pinning down what made Henry's Rock actually hard and handling that specifically. It felt like a different section of the heist was causing my downfall every time. If it wasn't the dozers at the start, it was the snipers at the end, or the turrets, or the dozers again. I'm seriously missing the ability to armor gate up against this massive spike damage. Even so, nothing felt insurmountable, and I could blame myself for every failure so far. I just need to play a little safer and control the pace with a little more intelligence. On attempt 8, things did fall quite nicely in my favour. I was able to handle the computer lab objective without too many issues, not needing to worry about being locked away with dozers in a small room, going on to just about hold out at the biolab objective too, thanks to one of the most clutch FAKs I've ever interacted with, saving me milliseconds from death. After that, everything seemed to funnel directly into my bullets, setting up for the challenging escape. Here I'd learned from previous failure that there's no need to rush things. Slow and steady progress through the hacks by taking cover in the entrance was vastly preferred to rushing and being pinned down outside. As a result, these hacks took a while, but I was eventually able to deactivate the sentries, regain some semblance of control over the helipad, and clear the heist after an hour of long graft. Henry's Rock is often the final hurdle before completion, making this a huge relief, but with stealth off the table, we still have a long way to go. On the plus side, Shacklethorn Auction is a wonderfully chaotic close-range heist where I can blast away to my heart's content, firing for well over 12 seconds straight to clear an entire room of specials, setting up for a simple first-time escape. Hell's Island is much of the same, a generally close quarters and linear heist that lets me showcase the power of the Heavy at its finest. Sadly, despite having no issues with the first half of the heist, at the escape with Locke and Bane, I found myself caught out, low on ammo and unable to break through the vast dozer health pools before they made a redistribution of my health bar. A frustrating, late failure, but one that doesn't come close to the annoyance I felt after attempt 2. Here, it felt like Murkies just stopped spawning around the time when the game demands you pick up 10 kills to start moving Locke, meaning we were stuck whilst the point of no return counted down. With just 30 seconds on the clock by the time we'd hacked open the gate to the escape, it was always going to be a close one. But with the clock at 1 second as Locke entered the chopper and the completion marker appeared, I'd made it. Or had I? Hell's Island failed. Somehow, despite the fact my Heavy was announcing victory via heist complete line, the game prioritises the point of no return over the usual delay in completion after standing in any escape. A crushingly irritating failure to take that couldn't have come any later into the heist. To make matters worse, attempt 3 was another timed out failure, this time by a more substantial margin, as I just couldn't get Locke moving early enough. The kill requirement on the Hell's Island escape might be the most annoying heist mechanic in the entire game. Ah well, at least I actually enjoy the rest of Hell's Island as once again I marched through the prison, following Bane's destructive rampage, proactively secured 10 kills in under 30 seconds this time, and held out at the escape to clear the heist with over 30 seconds still on the doomsday clock. That leaves us with just 2 heists to go, and with No Mercy effectively a hallway shooter, and me wielding possibly the best hallway shooting weapons imaginable, this was a breeze, transforming the Mercy Hospital into a scene resembling 32-player Dust Bowl after a hard-fought round of demo spam. That leaves us with one more heist to go, the White House, traditionally one of the hardest in the entire run, and a fitting way to end any saga. This time, it was going to be even more brutal, as stealth is straight up banned, and I'm not even allowing myself to stealth up to the P.O.C. for this one. It's loud all the way, baby. Here's the final build heading into the heist that's been so reliable throughout this run. Time for the brass beast to go on one final tear, and rip and tear it did, easily handling the usually problematic Oval Office section of the heist with sheer firepower alone. Let me tell you, this heist had everything. Dozers disappearing from the face of the earth rather than take me on, a manic push towards the east wing to force access to the P.O.C., and a crushing defeat as I was dominated by a taser and forced to eat lead from the rooftop sentries. Not to worry, I felt powerful. My bullets were sending Murkies to the Shadow Realm. I was crushing every tiny baby man I ran into and making some of the most clutch plays I think I ever have, managing to flick to 3 dangerous targets within a second whilst being tased. But all this was not enough. Once again, I found myself sprinting for the pardons as the assault wave died down, only to be tased in place a meter away from a fellow minigun wielder, ending an incredibly promising run in despair. Each attempt was taking upwards of 20 minutes, and although I'd only failed twice, nothing about progression through the White House ever felt assured. So, in a moment, foreshadowed all the way back during the Diamond, I decided to bring back the Hugh Long heater, except this time I had enough skill points to completely respec out-of-body expertise and instead specialise in shotgun damage to augment the heater's incredibly poor matchup against dozers. Without a doubt, this adaptation made things easier, applying crowd control across the map to protect objectives, stapling this fella inside a door, the weapon was so powerful, and eventually making it all the way to the P.O.C. with 12 FAKs still in my back pocket. Plenty of sandwich to handle just about anything that was thrown at me, or so I hoped. Unfortunately, even with its impressive crowd control, I was still at the mercy of bulldozers without overkill activated, being suplexed halfway across the control room, Pussy's extreme style, and dropping just seconds later when once again a taser got his grubby hands on me at the most inopportune moment. Even so, this was the build. When I could successfully activate overkill, the shotgun was a vastly preferred and safer option up against dozers, and regular fire-affected enemies could be kept at bay almost indefinitely. After 15 minutes, I was back at the P.O.C. and ready for round 4. I had plenty of close calls, almost gassing myself to death, taking on 3 dozers at once but somehow coming out victorious, and forcing my way out of the vault with all 24 pardons thanks to the humble stock shotgun that had carried us through the first half of the challenge. Once back at the surface, it was a war of attrition, with only 2 sandwiches remaining. But the incendiary damage of the heater helped me defend the anti-air hack from the cover of the White House, and after just over 28 minutes, we made the final waddle to Locke's chopper with what might be a record kill count for this series. A truly epic finale, proving once and for all that you can indeed complete Payday 2 as Team Fortress 2's Heavy, sometimes cosplaying as the Fat Scout. Wow, what a wild run. I was starting to worry back there that I'd be playing the heavy weapons guy without a heavy weapon, but I actually think that having to adapt to not having access to a minigun until level 80 added a little extra difficulty to the early game. I'm sure some of you might have preferred a vanilla run using the minigun style weapons native to Payday 2, but for me at least, this was the entirely unique experience I'm seeking out when I start any challenge run. Although I'd love to hear from anyone else keen to try this out, how possible it is without the modded TF2 weapons. We're almost halfway through the roster of TF2 mercenaries now, and whilst I have ideas on how to approach the likes of the NG, Sniper and Soldier, I'd love to hear some ideas for a potential medic or scout rule set. As ever, keep those challenge run ideas coming my way. I can't wait to start doing this over in Payday 3 as soon as we have access to it, so I need as much inspiration to work with as possible. For everyone else, I hope you enjoyed, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.